like to welcome each of you this morning to the Salem Chamber offices here as we take on a very robust schedule today. So I'd like to briefly, if I could, before we stand and do our national anthem, remind you a little bit about process today. We're going to be tackling both the Chemeketa Bond proposal as well as the city's Livability Levy. We have time allocated. You'll see those on your agendas in front of you. And it will be my duty to walk us through, keep us on time, because obviously one of the most important pieces of this is our time in Q&A together. My name is Tom Hofford, and I have the opportunity to serve as CEO of the Salem Chamber. Got a very talented staff team. A number of them is here. I want to express my thanks for gratitude to them, as well as our board members who are here in the room, including our president, Mike Herron from BIPS Industries. Looks like we have a couple more people coming in. If we could welcome them in too. I see we have 3 empty seats, and then we'll be ready as a staff team for 4 more chairs. Well, great to have you all with us. We are going to jump right in. I will give a preface briefly to each of these 2 campaigns, and then turn it over to the campaign teams to share their information with us. At the conclusion of the Chemeketa presentation, we're actually not going to take Q&A until after we get to Salem presentation. We want our questions, because we know they're involved in both campaigns, to be had with both panels. So if you would give me that grace, I would appreciate it. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jessica Howard, who is President and CEO of Chemeketa Community College. Joining her is Ryan Albritton, Senior Vice President of Chief Banking at Willamette Valley Bank. And also joining is Ken Hector from the Chemeketa Community Board of Directors. I am going to use a cheat clock here because it's my duty to keep us on time. I'm going to show this to you guys. If you could help me and stay on track, it's going to allow us to get through our meeting agenda perfectly. Dr. Howard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So good morning, and may I stand?
Well, of course.
Yeah, I'm a teacher, right? Ultimately, at some point. Thank you so much for being here this morning. It's a little on the early side, but I so appreciate being here and knowing that you're interested in hearing from your community college. So Chemeketa, you know who we are. And one reason you know who we are is that you could not throw a rock in this town. And Sheriff, I'm not advocating that anyone throw rocks or any other kind of violence, but you could not throw a rock in this town without hitting someone who hasn't had a direct and positive impact from the community college. I would hazard to say that would be true in this room as well. Part of the reason for that is that we are really everywhere. We're in our high schools, we're in our prisons, we provide small business support. The consulting is without charge, it's complimentary. We also have other supports for business and industry through our SBDC. We offer academic courses in transfer disciplines. We offer well over 100 technical credentials. We have community education. And of course, we offer cutting edge career and technical education that helps drive our economy forward and will make the critical difference as workforce continues to change with the effects of automation. AI, I clearly have made an impact with the automation and AI and digital technology and all these advances. So we are your area's primary workforce driver. But you know this already. And one reason I know that you know this is that you all heard our team speak for you last fall. You supported our bond measure, and for that we are extraordinarily grateful. And so what I will be talking about today, much of it will be highly reminiscent of what you saw last fall, with some additional components. So let's go ahead and get going. Okay, so Chemeketa Community College is not your mother's community college. I tell that to it is, you see the general points on the slide that summarize some of the things that are extraordinary about this college. We don't normally talk about ourselves in this way, but it is in fact true. Part of it is that we are a reflection of the community that we serve, and it's a great privilege to be in the position that we're in to serve this community. If I had to generalize why I think Chemeketa is extraordinary, I would say that we are innovative, we are responsive, we are extraordinarily partnership focused, which our community appreciates, and we manage our resources very wisely, maximizing their use for the benefit of the students and the community that we serve. That is reflected in the ROI number you see on the slide. For every $1 that a student contributes toward their education at Chemeketa, they get an $8.50 return. It's an extraordinary rate of return, particularly when you consider that the Oregon average among all 17 community colleges in our state, including Portland, is $5.50 return. So we are doing something right with how we manage our resources and how we put them to work for students in our community. So that's just one thing to mention here. The only other change on this slide from when you may have seen it last fall is down at the very bottom. We have led a consortium to create a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. It will open its doors next year. This is the result of tremendous legislative effort on the part of the gentleman right beside me and on our team. And this is truly groundbreaking because it addresses a critical healthcare workforce need in our community. This is Chemeketa doing what it does, helping to marshal forces forward to do something innovative to meet critical workforce needs. So that is new. You know, we already have our bachelor's degree in leadership and management, which employers all over this area are extremely excited about. So in 2008, you may recall, we passed, this community supported a bond levy through the Herculean efforts of Dick Withnell and the then President Cheryl Roberts. And this double majority, it was a huge effort of groundswell.
I don't understand what that is, but that had to be 67% vote.
Right. That's correct.
Positive.
And that was an investment in our community that resulted in, see all those pictures on the slide, those are actual photos of our students in spaces that were created by that bond. That created the capacity for us to train tens of thousands of students, in emergency services programming, healthcare, engineering, manufacturing, technology, welding, and more. And cannot stress enough what this has done for our community. Our community was able to see how important it was to invest in us, and we delivered. Very, very proud of this. Our college will always have a debt to this community for this bond levy. What we are asking for this time, we thought, okay, this bond is going, we are paying this bond off. We are almost done paying off the 2008 bond. Do we need another bond? If we do, what should it be for? So we spent over 2 years doing these external community conversations all across, and this is all about work. Employers we met with to say, what are we doing well? Where are the critical points of need? We did a comprehensive facility study to understand where are we with our facilities that the community's already invested in us, and what does it take to maintain those? We had many internal conversations. As you may know, every single one of our career and technical education programs has an advisory committee. Some of you, I'm sure, serve on those committees. We asked them what we should be doing, because if we're not in tune, then we're not the driver that you need. We had an employer workforce study that was very, very intense. We did that because it was post-pandemic, and we wanted to know, is this reality going to continue, or is this just a strange new chapter in the ongoing kind of landscape of our region? Got some tremendous insights there, which told us that we need to invest in things like construction and healthcare in particular, also emergency services. And then we did a lot of community polling to determine what the general population thought of us and what they wanted from us. All of that was an extraordinary kind of process leading up to what we put the bond on the November ballot. And we felt really, really good about that. And we went out, and as you all know, that bond effort was not successful. We then went out, you see the lessons learned. This is obviously new. We did was we went out and did a post-election survey representative of our voters. And what we found out from that survey, 3 salient points. One, that the community has a remarkably positive impression of the college. The support is very strong. In fact, even stronger than it was before the November ballot, if you can believe that. I mean, extraordinarily strong. Second, that 40% of voters did not realize this was a renewal bond. They thought it was a brand new tax. Third, that something like 20% of voters admitted they did not know what it was about. And our consultants have told us that it's very, most folks, when they're surveyed, are reticent to indicate that they don't know what they did or didn't vote on. So he thinks that's a very a low percentage. So people didn't know what it was about, and they thought it was a new tax. But they love us. So the upshot of this is people love Chemeketa, which I think is fabulous. If that wasn't the case, we'd have much bigger problems. But they didn't want a new tax. And this is understandable, given the fact that 118 was on the ballot. There was a lot of noise, a lot of money spent in advertising. You all are aware. We couldn't cut through that at all. We thought we were getting our message out there. Clearly, it was a lot of this. And so, given that input, and this is very recent input, right? This is December. We basically decided we need to go right back out again. And we were given that strong advice from our bond consultant, J.L. Wilson, who couldn't be here this morning, but otherwise would love to be here. And he said, here's why you need to go out in May. Because of this very, very recent positive impression by the community, you need to build on that. You also need to build on a strong campaign that simply all your people. And you need to have a much clearer message on that renewal bond, renewal tax. In other words, no increase to the property tax rate. Once the folks that we polled in December asked, when we asked them, if you had known this was a renewal bond, would you have voted for it? They said, absolutely, would have switched. And actually, as I'm going out and about talking about this anew, I'm hearing that too. I didn't know it wasn't a new tax, right? So those are the compelling reasons for us to move forward. Also, we have some needs that are obviously driving. So as you can see, this is the picture regarding what the 2008 bond asked for of our voters. And then what we're asking for this go around. You see the amount is different, 92 million versus 140. However, I would say 140 in our current economics place actually buys you less than 92. Those of you in construction know this very well. But the salient point here is that the tax rate is no different. That is the maximum, and that will be the maximum for the duration of this bond. So it is a renewal bond. So what will this bond fund? You heard this last November from me. Career and technical education is a primary feature of what this bond, if passed, would help us support. And you can see we've got some very specific things here. We need to double our capacity for paramedic programming. If any of you are aware, we have a desperate need for paramedics who speak both English and Spanish throughout our region. And we have changed the curriculum, which is not easy to do. We've run it through all the various hoops you can imagine to try to get us to be able to get more people through in a more accelerated fashion. The only thing keeping us from making that actually come to pass is the facility that we work in. We need to change the facilities to allow us to do that. So this has a very direct impact on paramedic programming in particular. We also will be expanding that programming across the district, EMS, EMT. We also, biggest feature here is we need a trade center on our campus. You see that little building on the bottom? That's where all of our apprentices work in the evenings. You know how that whole apprentice model is, that they work at their company during the day, and then at night they get the book learning. That's the model. And so in the evenings, if you were to go into that little building right there, you would see these, they're mostly gentlemen in our electrical, HVAC, sheet metal, et cetera, programming almost on top of each other. We've got to expand capacity for those existing apprenticeships, and we also want to expand apprenticeships, and we want to expand construction. And I mean industry needed construction, things that relate directly to the workforce. And that is all something that would come about because of this bond measure. Other categories of things that this bond would help us fund, improve teaching and learning spaces. How many of you are using a telephone, a cell phone that's 15 years old? That is the issue in our classrooms, and we simply must shore up that experience for our students who are coming from high school with some significant learning challenges post-pandemic, and there are some studies that have come out recently that show what's coming through our door. We have got to be able to get those students through. This is important for that. We also have compliance standards that continue to change that we simply must address. Health and disaster preparedness. Remember the Sandy Am fire. Incident command was located at Chemeketa. It was in building 7, which is our largest gathering space. It has no air conditioning. I want you to imagine what that was like. Over here on the far left, that's a picture of what was going on at that time, right? And we had, we had Canadian firefighters, we had American firefighters. They were bivouacked on different fields because restrictions were different per the different countries. We had technology. It was unbelievable. This is the kind of function that Chemeketa serves. We serve that way we also were a staging point for PGE during that devastating winter ice storm the following February. Something we do. We are happy to do it. We want to do it. This bond would allow us to shore up that building in particular, so it could serve as a disaster resilience shelter or a resource for this community in the case of something like the big one, right? We don't have a lot of spaces like this. This is a very direct Salem community impact, and that's a big feature of this bond. Safety and security on campus. As you might see that picture of the camera. See that picture? We have every possible iteration of security camera, and they don't talk to each other, and some show a picture and some. This is something we have got to completely overhaul. Safety and security is key. People need to be safe on our campuses. They need to be safe in our parking lots. HVAC is an issue as well. This is all about taking care of the investment the community has already made in us and ensuring that we are offering the kind of experience that this community needs to have in its community college. Science. This is a very specific piece of this. Our Woodburn Center requires most of the students who attend our campus in Woodburn are there to get the 2-year degree and then transfer on to a 4-year partner. And they can do all of that there, except for one course. And that is, see how that reality was that it was screaming. One course they cannot get site is the sophomore science lab. It's the applied, it's the chemistry, biology, or the geology, or whatever it is. It's required. You must have one of those courses. You don't get the full 2-year degree. If you don't have that full 2-year degree and you try to transfer, the receiving institution will pick it apart and you'll have to do a lot of things over. I can't stress to you how important it is for us to complete that 2-year degree in Woodburn, where we have people who literally do not have the transportation to get to Salem. So this is a very specific and relatively small piece of the bond, but very much needed. And then supportive environments for student success. It's one thing to offer our programs. If students come in and are not successful, we haven't done our job. And so we need tutoring centers, math hubs, all sorts of writing centers. We have to have supports for students increasingly post-pandemic to get them through. So there's a portion of this that's related to that. So I'm noticing I'm going to give back a little bit of time to my friends on the other side of the podium. That is what this bond is about. The 2 salient facts for you and for our community. This is a renewal bond. This is not asking for an increase in the tax rate. In fact, it guarantees that will not happen. And secondly, this is all about building our future workforce in our community. And so with that, I would turn it over to the gentleman on my right.
Me?
Yeah.
You want to go again?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm J.L. Wilson's alter ego. But on a serious note, Jessica has, I think, admirably outlined why we're here. And, so we can't thank you enough for all your support. Chemeketa, as Jessica said, is part of our community and a big part of workforce, which is why all of you are here because of workforce. You're business people. You know the need for employees, skilled employees, regardless of what the industry is. It's asking a lot, but we're giving a lot back to the community in terms of bringing you the employees that you need so that your businesses can thrive. So on that, we thank you for your prior support, and we ask for your continuing support. We ask for your visible and public support of our bond. It will benefit students, and it will more importantly benefit your businesses. So again, thank you again for being here, and again, please seriously consider supporting our bond.
Yeah. So good morning, everyone. I'm here in a bunch of different capacities. It feels like I serve on the Salem Health Foundation board, and I hear about the nursing program and how difficult it is to get into that. Not that I've tried, because that's never going to happen. I think of the 3 letters that Dick Whitnell has talked about and championed for a long, long time. And those 3 letters, ROI, our families go way back, the Whitnells and the Albritons. My dad used to run a radio station in town, and I remember Gail would get on there and say, "Hi, I'm Gail, Dick Whitnell's wife." And so I'm pretty sure there was a moment when I was looking up from my crib, and Dick was looking down at me, and he says, he starts singing a lullaby, and it was like, "Hush, little baby, don't you cry. I'm gonna teach you ROI." And ever since that moment, return on investment's been a big deal for me. But I think that Chemeketa, my kids have both greatly been served by Chemeketa and have gone on in their careers. My daughter's still attending the Chemeketa, the OIT, dental hygiene. She'll graduate in here. But I'll just tell you that it's about good paying jobs and stable tax revenue, and specifically trading sector jobs. That's a big deal. And so that leads me to my other capacity here as the current chair of SEDCOR. This is important to us as an organization at SEDCOR with 400 plus members. And SEDCOR has been largely on the sidelines on things like this and anything public where we've supported or not supported publicly. In fact, Rich Duncan's a long time SEDCOR board member and past chair. I don't know if we've ever come out and supported or endorsed anything. And that changed this week when I got the votes to come out and publicly endorse this bond measure for Chemeketa. And so we're doing that. And SEDCOR would ask the chamber to join us in that exact thing. We believe this is important. Trading jobs pay higher wages than most jobs around. And we specifically retain and attract and recruit companies for this very thing. So we need a workforce that's ready. And so that's important to us at SEDCOR. And I believe it's important to the chamber as well. So we'd humbly ask for your endorsement of this bond measure. And I guess it takes a village, if you will. I heard that before. But I think at the end of the day, Dr. Howard started it off with your community college. And I think if you really took a step back and looked, this is absolutely our community college. And it's important to understand that they take money that is net zero, by the way. They take that money and they use it very, very well. And they make sure it extends. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that in Dr. Howard and the Chemeketa, and humbly ask for your endorsement.
Past President Albritton. We've heard the Chemeketa proposal now, and we are going to switch to the City of Salem side. It is wonderful to hear that SEDCOR is taking a position now. At times, our organization, having been always taking a position, we're looking for a partner there, and that is absolutely fantastic news. So thank you to you and your board, Ryan, on that. At this point, wow, what a panel we have in front of us, and true to our city's trajectory right now, under the leadership of Mayor Julie Hoy, in partnership with acting city manager Krishna Namburi, they have shown up in mass to really show and point the emphasis of the importance of the considering the City of Salem Livability Levy. Before we turn it over to them, I'd like to provide some context of why our organization has been so involved in this process. And there has been some dialogue that I would like to really clarify on behalf of our organization. When the Revenue Task Force was drawn together by the past City Council, we quickly asked, would we be able to look also at expenses? And we're explicitly told, no, we are not. The Revenue Task Force is gathering solely for the purpose of looking at revenues. We had a number of our individuals who served on that, including members in this room, and Jim Boo, Bill Rickey, and forgive me if I'm forgetting others. There are 69 of you in this room, which is fantastic to see. We believe that any stool needs to have 4 solid legs. In fact, if you recall, the great Orville Roth always talked about his 4 legs of the stool. And one of those legs needs to be a leg of credibility. Before coming to the community and asking for dollars, we look comprehensively at the entire budget. And one of the legs that was missing is that of an outside look at efficiencies. Our organization, in partnership with Home Builders of Marion Polk County, asked our city councilor, our former city manager, for the opportunity to establish a blue ribbon committee that would look at efficiencies. And contrary to what you may hear, at no point did we think this committee was going to find $14 million in savings. Rather, the reason we asked for this committee is about credibility. Our organization wanted to make sure that if the city, which we was intended to move forward with an ask for dollars, that they would do so with an incredibly relevant and proven out reason for asking for that, thus establishing greater accountability and credibility with the voting public. I'd like to thank Chair Bernard, Kathy Gordon, Ryan Dempster, and Todd Granado, who are in this room today, for serving on that. It was a lot of time. These are experts in the field of looking at large financial management, and they represented our business community very well. So thank you. They came on the heels of the efforts of Jim Boo, Bill Rickey, and a number of others of looking at forecasting, in which they were able to save approximately $4 million out of the city's budget due to projections. Our organization has been heavily involved because this affects our small businesses each and every day. And I want to applaud the city and the members of the city staff who are here today in support of both their elected officials and professional staff team. At this point, I'm going to introduce briefly our panel and then turn it over to them, and they will have 38 minutes to share their compelling case of why our organization and the business community needs to consider a City of Salem livability levy on this May's ballot. We'll kick it off with our Mayor, Julie Hoy. We have Paul Tigan, Ward 1. We have City Council President Linda Nishioka out of Ward 2, City Councilor Deanna Gwent representing Ward 4, Acting City Manager Krishna Namburi, David Levy with the Salem Library Advisory Board Chair, Taylor Sharman, Salem Public Library Foundation Executive Director, and the aforementioned Ryan Moore, the City Efficiency Committee Director, who also serves as CEO of Neighborly Ventures. Julie, the stage is yours. And again, I'm going to use this timing clock just so I can keep everybody on schedule, because one of the most important parts, of course, of today is Q&A. So with that, Julie, the time is yours.
Thank you. Well, if anyone was at the State of the City yesterday, you know, clocks mean a lot to me, especially clocks that count down. I so appreciate the opportunity to be with you, especially in this space. This space at Chamber is special to me because it's the space where I first heard anyone in my life talk about policy. and the things that impact us as businesses and as citizens. So that one thing led to another, and I'm sure some of those people in the room at the time are in disbelief that I am sitting here as the mayor of Salem, Oregon. But I am so happy to be, and I couldn't be more proud of the team that we have to work with in this particular time. I think it's absolutely by design. I feel great about that. We are here to talk about the levy, obviously, that I didn't see coming, but I have watched form into something that makes a lot of sense. And the folks that are with me today are going to make that, paint that picture in probably a better way than I can. So I'm gonna turn it on over. And are you next?
Yeah,
We have a
it's me
clip.
next. Oh, thank you. I was going to ask for presentation. Mayor Hoy, I can see why you have a clock in your office. Now that makes me nervous. That like ticking.
Don't worry.
But if we can have the presentation up, because of the time, I'm going to start talking. So thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Krishna Namburi, and I'm the acting city manager, and I have been with the city for 25 years. Out of those 25 years, I served as department head for 10 plus, and three years as a deputy city manager. And thank you so much for having us here today. If you can go to, I think third slide. There you go. So I'll talk about the challenge that we have right now. Even with cutting position staffing, expenses, and with the work of the efficiency committee and the forecast review team, the city still has a $13.8 million budget deficit, and that is real. And there are two things, major reasons that are contributing to that budget deficit. We have a statewide limit on revenue. We also, like as everyone are experiencing this, inflation, raising costs. And so those two are not just unique to just Salem. This is kind of similar to other cities in Oregon too. But we have an opportunity here to take control of this challenge, and we'll talk about the details. But to me, I think we have to, as a community, as an organization, City of Salem, and elected officials, we have to take a strategic approach on how to take control of this. So with that, we'll talk more about it as we go. I'll turn it over to Councilor Gwynn to talk about why this matters to you.
Can we get the next slide?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, sorry. So obviously, why this should matter to all of us is, like it says on the screen, it's a good place to live, good place to work. I just want you to picture. So I'm a city councilor, but by trade, I'm a real estate broker. For 20 years, I was a buyer's agent, and we had businesses that would call us and say, I've got an executive or an employee that's interviewing for a job, and we need you basically to sell Salem. So we would invite the family, or a lot of times it was a couple, a husband and a wife, or whatever their family makeup was. So we'd have a couple come into the office, we'd sit down, just talk to them about the community, and then I would take them to tour. So I would drive, and I had a specific route, but I would drive them by the library and Center 50 Plus and drive through some of our parks. When we first moved to Salem, I lived like 3 blocks from Bush Park. So I love Bush Park. So and I love all the parks. I love all of the amenities of Salem. And I just can't imagine taking a husband or a wife. A lot of times what would happen is the candidate who's applying for that job would be at their interview. So they would set aside 2 hours to be at that interview. And I would be out with the other half of that family selling Salem. And we would talk about things like the programs that the library has and the parks and the fun things to do. And I just can't imagine taking that tour now and not being able to express to people the benefits of. So I do think that this levy is important for our community. And I am going to pass it on to, I don't know who is next.
To me.
Okay, back to you.
Thank you, yeah. So thank you, Councilor Gwen, and yeah, there you go. So so I'm going to talk about what has been done to cut costs so far. I'm not going to go prior to 2024, fiscal year 24, but between fiscal year 24 and 25, we made close to $8.1 million in reductions. And that includes police, includes library, parks, and youth and senior services. And then talking about the work that has been done by forecast review team. Tom, thank you for kind of mentioning that. And those of you who have served on the forecast review team and the efficiency committee, you have done an incredible job helping us to navigate this challenge. The work, I mean, I do want to highlight the work that was done by the forecast review team. Our budget deficit was at 17.7. There were 2 things that the review team looked into. One is to be more accurate about our revenue, and then also looking at our salary savings and the material savings and all, and to kind of reflect the past history, right? So that kind of reduced that deficit from 17.7 to 13.8. So that's kind of the work that has been done. And the recent work with the City Efficiency Committee, and I would like to invite Brian Moore to reflect on his work as a chair of this. Brian?
Thank you, Krishna. Good morning, everybody. 3 really quick items of business. Rich Duncan, if you're frustrated by the Chevy Silverado next to your truck when you go out leave today, talk to me. I might know that. Second point of business, if you find yourself on a committee with Ernesto Toscovich, watch your back. May end up chair of that committee. Third, great to hear Ryan Albritton singing. Appreciate that. Grateful for the opportunity to have served along with Todd and Kathy and Ryan and other great members of our committee. I do want to make one clarification. While certainly I think we can all appreciate that the findings of the committee have an impact on people's feelings on the levy, that was not, the levy itself was not a part of what we did as a committee. Our objectives were threefold. We were to try to identify efficiencies, increase understanding about the city's budgetary process and constraints, and also create a sense of, as Tom talked about, transparency relates to the city's budgeting process. So none of those, of course, is about the levy itself. So while at the risk of maybe sounding unsupportive of the panel this morning, I do just, in honor of my colleagues here and the work that was done, I need to make sure that it's clear our committee did not take a position on the levy. But again, recognize that the work of the committee has an impact on feelings regarding the I think in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and just, there's some exhilarating reading you can find from the committee online. I'm just going to read 3 or 4 sentences that were our conclusions. And then if there's time for questions at the end, I'm happy to take them. But we had some findings that I'll share. We did find some opportunities for efficiency, but in summary, it about went like this for us. In the time given, the committee did not find inordinate waste among the city general fund operations, and did find that the city is doing more with significantly fewer resources than cities of similar sizes. Where there are potential inefficiencies, the committee recommends city leadership pursue the specific opportunities for efficiency outlined in this report. Nevertheless, the committee finds that none of these efficiency opportunities in and of themselves will preserve the current levels of city services without addressing largely external influences powerfully impacting the city's budget. Those externalities, if unaddressed, will dramatically limit city general fund's ability to operate without a deficit. This leaves few options outside of service cuts or new revenue. It's as succinct a summary as we could come up with. It's largely reflected on the slide. If you want to go to the next one, I don't know that unless people at the end feel a desire, I don't think I'm going to go into each of these. You can find these and a few other opportunities that we found for efficiencies in the letter, or happy to talk about it at the end, but I want to make sure the rest of this panel has enough time to cover remaining agenda.
Thank you, Brian. And I'll be talking about some of those recommendations anyway. Next slide, please. Thank you. So from the work that the efficiency committee has done, they made like 5 recommendations. And out of those 5 recommendations, we looked into what are the ones that we can actually really start kind of implementing on it right away, right? So the 3 that you see on the left, which is the first one is to reduce overtime for fire and police. And I'll talk about that a little bit, is the reason for the overtime on the public safety side of it is we have to maintain minimal staffing. And that's kind of the reason why we have that overtime. But after talking to the efficiency committee and some of the work that we have done, and I've talked to both chiefs about it, we are actively looking into, we have to fill our vacancies. In order to reduce overtime, we have to fill out vacancies, and we have to find that sweet spot about how many positions we have to fill to reduce that overall cost of operations for public safety. So we are actively working on that, the first one. And the second one about the AI solutions, and we have done a lot of work over the past 18 months on it. And the reason for implementing those AI solutions is to really to help with the employee workload, number one. Number two, as we move forward, it's not about what we are doing today. We also have to look at the overall cost of operations for the next 10 years. So we have to be looking into AI solutions where we're not adding additional resources, because that is going to cost the city more. So we are also, we have actually kind of started working on this aggressively over the past 1 month. We have dedicated resources working on those AI solutions. And the third one is continuing efficiency audits. And this is kind of another recommendation from the efficiency committee. We have recently done the city manager's office audit. We are in works for risk management audit, IT, and other. The piece that I kind of really resonated from the recommendation from the efficiency committee is we started doing these efficiency audits, but one of the points that the committee made, it's not about doing those audits, but the city has to take some accountability on implementing some of the recommendations these audits are giving. So that actually honestly really resonated with me. And that's kind of the path that we are going to be in. And we're already doing that. So I want to kind of appreciate the efficiency committee for that point. That was actually very valuable to the city. And then I'll talk about the right side of it. What you see on the right side, making cuts, that is new. Effective last week, we put in those 7 measures in place. There is not going to be any new travel, no overtime travel, and training. We are only going for the mandatory training. We kind of stopped that. And no overtime for non-public safety. Like I said, with public safety, we have to maintain minimal staffing. We don't have an option. No new consultants, no new software, no new technology, and reduced supplies. And I'll talk about number 7 in a minute, but I think the reason why we kind of have to put those measures in place, we need to look for some cost savings immediately. We are in financial crisis, right? So we need to look at what are we going to get this year? If we apply the same measures for the next year, what are those cost savings look like? So that's kind of the second piece. The third piece of it is the positions that are left open. The department heads and we are evaluating what are the positions. I think there are three things for me: the vacancies that we have, what vacancies we must fill, what vacancies can be frozen, what vacancies can be eliminated. So that's kind of what we are evaluating right now, and that should give us some immediate cost savings, but also long-term cost savings. So a combination of those three are going to really help us to kind of understand, and I'll talk about why it is a painful. Everything that you're seeing there, that is not a sustainable model. Like you can think about, Chemeketa was just talking about the technology, and that's temporary. But we felt like it was necessary for us to do this right now. And that, for me, the number one reason we are in a financial crisis, anything and everything that we can do to reduce the cost, that's number one. The second piece of it is, which is, we all agree, and that putting the entire budget deficit on the community is not a fair thing. We want to do our part. We want to see what we can cut the costs, and then only ask for what we need. So that's kind of the another reason why we went with that. So I just want to talk about, Tom mentioned it a little bit. This is not going to fix everything. This is not going to fix the 13.8, but every dollar counts, every penny counts at this point. So with that, I would like to, sorry, I'm speaking very fast today, but I would like to invite Councilor Nishioka to talk about the impact of not having this levy and what this investment costs to the community. So,
thank you, Krishna. Appreciate that. And thank you all for letting us be here. And I'm honored to be one of the panel members to be in front of you today. So what we have to look at is that I want to also make it clear that while we are in our budget season, which starts mid-April and goes through mid-May, that's going to be prior to the ballot, which is May 20th. We are going to be making dramatic cuts during that time because we have to present a balanced budget to the state on July 1st, and we won't know if the levy will pass. And so people are going to see these kind of cuts that will impact us. And what I want you to recognize during that time is that we still need you to consider voting for that levy, so that we can come back together as a budget committee and council before July 1st and readjust those cuts that we make. So I do want us to understand that, because it can get confusing on this kind of parallel path that we're on. Without the levy, significant cuts will be necessary, impacting layoffs and service reductions that will impact Salem's community and the quality of life, as Councilor said earlier. And the programs that are easy or easier is Parks and Recreation, Library, Center 50+. We can lock a door to a library, can lock a door to Center 50+, but boy, is it tough to lock the parks. And with decreased maintenance in our parks and decreased recreational services that bring tourism in, will be greatly affected. And that will affect the livability and quality of life here in Salem. So we need to keep that in mind. Well, and while these services rely heavily on volunteers, that reduces the cost for these services. But if we have to decrease staffing or close programs, we won't have someone to help coordinate and manage those volunteers. So we'll lose that savings and also those people that are helping. So what I now need to talk about is the investment. Next slide, please. What is this levy costing us? We decided as a council to choose 98 cents. Feels better. 98 cents feels better than $1.10. But we also had reassessed some of the costs for those programs. And this levy at 98 cents would definitely cover those costs. And so that's important. And we also added that we wanted it in its separate fund so it could be managed and not falling back into the general fund with kind of a nebulous uncertainty if it's all going directly to these services that we are promising on the levy. And Councillor Tigan said earlier that you can expect that every dollar that you're contributing will be managed and watched over and made sure that they go to the promised services from that levy. And so for the average home, it would be $220 per year or $18 a month. And I want you to realize that this is an investment. It's easy when you have that ballot in front of you to think about, wow, how much is this going to cost me? But I want you to think about how much that's investing into our community. And that's something that I feel we all need to look at, because if we don't invest into our community, who's going to want to stay? Who's going to want to come? And I'll use a personal example. My husband grew up in Salem. And when he was looking at coming here to join a medical practice, I was uncertain I wanted to live here. And as Councillor Gwynn was saying earlier, I came down and we had family here. His family was still here. And we'd come. And I thought, do I want to live here? We were living in the Seattle area. And so when you think about the livability and the amenities that a city or a town can provide you, it is really important to make sure that we are a livable community for others to want to come here. And we did decide to come here. And I'll tell you, one of that decision was because Nordstrom's was here. and I'd come over from West Salem and see Nordstrom's. And I'm going, okay, I can be here. So you have to also understand that communities adapt and change, and we have to recognize those changes. And I know that Councillor Tigan also has recruited people for this area. So we have to consider how this tax to you is truly an investment in our city. And that's the last thing I'll say is that the fiscal year, the levy would generate 14 million, which is what we're needing. And then over the 5 years, 76 million. And it really is an investment in our community. Thank you.
Next slide. Sorry, I have never been this nervous about time in my entire life. So if you have 14 minutes, Captain, we can do this.
We're doing great.
Great. So with that, I would like to invite Tigan to talk about what this levy is and then the impact.
Yeah, it turns out Councilor Nishioka said half the things I wanted to say. So I too took my wife on a tour of this town. We decided to move here. The experience Councilor Gwynn recounted is an experience that many people have had coming to Salem. And it turns out some of those people stick around long enough and get invested enough in the community that at some point they find themselves sitting at this very table, asking you to continue to invest in the future of our town. That to me is just amazing. That is not something we talked about, but for those experiences to be shared. I will say that when my wife and I came here, and it was in August of 2015, and August coming down Commercial Street and into North Salem, sometimes the grass is a little bit long. Sometimes it hasn't been mowed, right? And it's growing up next to people, chain link fences. We chose North Salem. We love it here. But what this livability levy does is fully funds, to the extent that we have it today, and a little bit more than we do today in terms of libraries, returning to some funding we had a few years ago, the Parks and Recreation program. So all of our parks are maintained in the city, and that we have a robust recreation program for kids and adults alike to participate in. Our 2 libraries are funded to the extent that they are now, with a little bit of bump up in hours, because we've heard a lot from the public that they don't feel like the library is open enough. So both of those institutions would see increases in time. And then the Center 50 Plus building would be open as much as it is today with the same amount of staffing. And like Councilor Nishioka mentioned, the ability for all of those volunteers, that's really the engine of volunteerism, is amazing at Center 50 Plus, and we would not lose that. And really the key part of this is by the functionality of it. Have spent a number of years on the budget committee, as many in the room know, is by taking these funds and putting them into a separate fund. It allows our city staff, like Josh and his team, to manage those funds, particularly for these institutions that the voters would be supporting. It doesn't force us to make a choice between police and splash pads, which is something we went through last year, right? And by putting these in their own fund, then we can have a discussion, okay, within this fund for the next 5 years, we get these services for it. And then the police and fire departments and the other general fund institutions remain in the general fund, and all general fund dollars go to those institutions. It's really about strengthening all 5 of the programs that you see on this slide. And
Next slide.
I think just what we're also getting at here is that you're hearing it from a couple of us that we really believe as a full council that part of this thriving community that we want to see is that all of the institutions that represented are fully supported. And there's some numbers here about visitor spending and about the jobs in the region that come through economic development, through tourism, and the tourism taxes that are collected. We really feel like if we start chipping away at these institutions, if when people come to our city, the lawn isn't mowed in the park, and if they read in the paper that we've drastically closed or reduced hours at one of the nation's capital's libraries, that the impact to our community is very great, and it would come back to us. And as Councilor Nishioka said, I have personally recruited dozens of people to live in Salem, highly educated people that come with their families. And the bar of trying to recruit somebody away from Boise, away from Missoula, away from Salt Lake City, no, bring your intelligence, bring your vitality, bring your creativity to Salem. If they open the paper, I passed up on towns based on what I read in the paper on them. I came to Salem. If they read in the paper that this town doesn't have a library, or they come on their tour and the park looks like family show, if that's what the park looks like, they're going to go to Boise. They're going to go to Salt Lake City, and their energy is not going to come here. That's a real problem.
Next slide, please. Because of the time that I'm going to skip that, if you can go to the next one, because I know Councilor Nishioka talked about it, why this matters now, right? Because no, that's okay. No, it's a teamwork. So why this matters now? Because we have to give a balanced budget. We have to propose a balanced budget in April. And I apologize for this, the numbers are so small there. But what I really want to kind of talk about is, before we get into, I know there are a lot of questions about the community, and the council did say, have been very vocal about public safety is #1 focus for this community. Why is City of Salem and the council chose to go for livability levy has been a question. So before I get into the details of why, I just want us to look into the 5-year forecast. What that slide has, and we'll give you a copy of it, but it has that potential levy for, with the livability levy, there is a $14 million we are going to generate next year, and the following year is 14.661. There is that revenue with some growth there, right? By separating that community services levy from general fund, it does free up that dollar amount in the general fund. Even with the levy, you can see that the red at the bottom, there is still a budget deficit. We don't think, and I don't think it is fair to put that budget deficit on the community, right? So for us to be kind of addressing that red, we are pursuing for other revenue measures like the payment in lieu of taxes and other revenue streams, but also the cost savings that I talked about, the measures that we put in place And by the way, those measures are across all the departments, all the funds. It's not just general fund, because general fund does feed to some of these other service funds. So by applying those measures across the board, we are actually helping the general fund in a way. So that's kind of has been in there. So we are looking at those cost savings. We are looking at the new revenue, and that is the kind of the path forward to kind of fix that red that we are kind of looking into, right? When people, the question is, why are we going with this instead of public safety levy? To me, there are two main reasons. Number one, relying on a temporary funding for police and fire, we are going to put public safety at risk. Number two, when you are looking at that revenue for livability levy, the growth is pretty limited. The revenue is limited, the growth is limited. Public safety needs are bigger than that growth. So strategically, it does not make sense to put that in that bucket. So that's kind of the second reason to kind of do this. What I want to kind of say before I hand it over to the other panel members is, for me, 13 years we have been in this budget challenge. I kind of look at this as like a vicious cycle, right? Like we have more demand for needs, but then we don't have resources to kind of serve those needs. At some point, we have to be strategic, we have to be smart, and we have to break the cycle. And that's the only way to move forward. And this model gives us the way to break the cycle, right? So with that, I would like to have David Levy and Taylor to kind of talk about coalition and the effort that you guys have been doing.
Well, I will just say, to be on a panel with this many elected officials, we are on time still. So, I'm Taylor Starman. I'm the executive director of the Salem Library Foundation. And my colleague David have been pulling together a coalition of folks who have been advocating to have a livability levy for voters this May. And that coalition has included Friends of the Salem Library, Friends of Center 50 Plus, several parks advisory groups, and lots of other community organizations who care about the livability of this city. And so what we have been doing is meeting and organizing, putting a lot of energy and momentum. And now that there is officially a levy referred, we're shifting gears into the official campaign mode to ask voters to support this levy and advocate for its passage. So I wanted to give you all a quick update on kind of the momentum behind this campaign. We already hired and retained a political consultant who has won multiple communities levy and bond campaigns and knows how we can win here. We are well on our way to our fundraising goal, over halfway actually, to raise the money and the resources that'll be necessary to communicate with voters directly about why this matters and what's at stake here in the community if we don't pass the levy. And endorsements are growing every day with this campaign. You heard the mayor talk yesterday at the State of the City about some new folks who are joining the campaign coalition. And it's really exciting to be a part of this group right now, who are all really focused on how we talk to voters on election day, which is only 75 days away from right now. So I'd love to invite all of you. And obviously one of the things that will be really important for the campaign is to communicate the support of the business community. And there's no better validator than the chamber. And so would really love to have your support as we build this campaign, and as well as individual business support as well. So David, anything you'd like to add?
Oh, thanks. And thanks for this opportunity and being part of this distinguished panel. I'm a big fan of Mission Impossible, so I know what happens when that clock hits zero. So I'm watching that. I would just concur with what Taylor has talked about, just to give you a kind of a broader sense. We came together about 6-7 months ago as partners with the city. As many of us are stakeholders and advocates for libraries and Center 50 and Parks and Rec. We recognize the city needed some help. So we represent, you think you represent a diverse group. We represent a very diverse group with many different interests, many different priorities, many different concerns. We sat around a table, locked the door, and tried to figure out how we could work together, how we could raise the resources, how we could raise the awareness, how we could help the city through this problem. And That, our success at that level has enabled us to create this planning group and this public awareness campaign that we're working on for the next 75 days. So I appreciate city staff help in moving this. And we're ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Thank you.
So thank you, David and Taylor. Before I turn it over to Madam Mayor, I do want to acknowledge this levy has a direct impact to public safety. And I appreciate, I know Scotty and Matt are hiding there, but I appreciate both fire and police union support on this. They are endorsing this levy, so they're here. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Madam Mayor for closing this presentation and final thoughts.
Thank you. What I'm getting from this presentation is just an overwhelming sense of cooperation. We have a spirit of cooperation happening throughout council, throughout city staff, throughout police and fire, throughout the coalition of the library, Center 50 Plus, and parks. And I haven't felt anything like that in the 3 years that I've been involved in anything with the work that I'm doing in governance. So that feels very different and very exciting, and anything is possible. I do hope that you will support us in this effort. It's a sprint, right? We've got 75 days to get this done. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, we are going to now get into Q&A. I have been implored by our board, and so I'm going to be very direct and open and honest with you. This is not the time for your long opinion on things. This is a Q&A period. I have been instructed to interrupt you if you do not get to a question rather quickly. I apologize for that up front. I don't enjoy being in that space, but I will be in that space. We will start with Director Castro Monroy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I have 12 questions, a dozen questions, but I'll only ask one. Okay. So my question is actually more for Mr. Moore, for the Efficiencies Committee. Did you have the opportunity to engage in focused efforts to improve efficiencies by privatization of some of the services, service consolidation, fee for service, or innovative volunteer programs like a Salem Adopted Park program? We have it for the streets, we could live in the park. Have you and your committee had the opportunity to engage that deep in different corners of our budget?
Yeah, I would say actually 3 of the 4 things you just mentioned, we did talk about consolidation of services, privatization. I can't remember the other 2, the adopt a park idea or something like it. No, well, actually we did talk about volunteers and leveraging volunteers. So the answer to the question is yes. Our recommendations don't hinge significantly on those things other than potentially the opportunity for consolidation of services, particularly between neighboring jurisdictions. So one example is, and Chief Gerboth's here, but you know, we talked about the possibility, for example, I don't remember exactly which stations, but there's a city station and a county fire station not too far from each other, I think in northeast. And we talked about the possibility of combining those efforts as an example. Now, ultimately, we didn't vet that idea. So that's going to be up to those who know how things work to decide that. So that's a specific example. We did talk about those things, but we also only had 2 weeks and about 6.5 hours together. So the depth that we could get into some of those things was limited.
Zachary Zillicky.
Clarifying question on the fluid report, but I just make sure I heard this right. This is going to say it does not pass. Will there be funding cuts to the police, fire, other departments like that? It's just a clarifying question.
Yeah, and I can talk about that. So if right now the immediate cuts are going to be, majority of them are going to be on the community services, right? Kind of what for the next year. But with that, as you're looking at the budget deficit, there are going to be cuts in the following years to public safety because of that funding gap.
Thank you.
I want to turn over to Phil. By the way, if you have not celebrated, Lighthouse is reopening their facility. Phil and his company was a victim of a very tough situation with the homeless community, having burned part of his building down. Phil, great to have you here.
Great, thanks for your time. Quick question. So how much is the total budget?
For the general fund, the cities is close to 900 million.
So,
General fund is 180 or 190.
so the part that we're looking to fund right now is 1.5% of that total budget?
Close to like actually 8% of that. 8% of the 190
General.
and is what we are.
Of the general fund.
Of the general fund, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we've saved $4 million in 6.5 hours?
Mhm.
I'm curious why we can't
No.
find 5 or
Forecasting.
Yeah.
savings overall.
I'm sorry, just to correct, it was the $4 million was found by the forecasting committee that met, not the efficiencies committee.
Okay, okay, great. Seems like with a budget of that size, we should be able to find at least 5% savings. I mean, just from experience and working with larger organizations, maybe probably a lot of people have worked hard. It seems, from my point of view, that we would be able to find something if we dug a little deeper.
Mhm.
Director.
Can you address that?
Well, I personally agree with you. There's this is me, who doesn't know a ton about how this stuff works, but I have learned that there are certain buckets that cannot cross over into general fund issues. It's not like it's just sitting there and we can go, well, you got 900 million, let's move it over here, right? Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I can kind of add to that. So, Madam Mayor is absolutely right. So we are looking at $190 million for general fund. That's kind of the bucket where we have the budget deficit, right? So over the years, the city has cut several, cost savings measures, and we have kind of done a lot of work on this. So unfortunately, we are at a point where 8% savings out of like 190, that's just not possible at this point, right? Can we find maybe 2%? Maybe. Like I can 1 to 2% makes sense to me, but 8% is a huge number. But also we are looking at, I know we have both chiefs here, public safety. We need to do something to keep investing into public safety. So we also have that need. So I just want to kind of pause there, but 8% savings out of $190 million is to me that doesn't seem to be even possible. I know the efficiency committee, and part of the thing that they looked into is, can we find that, right? So that's kind of my response, because we have done so many cuts over the years. Right now, finding 8% is just not a viable option at this point.
Talking about the general fund is one thing. Talking about the whole budget is another thing. And I personally am not done, and I know that this team is not done looking for efficiencies. I'll throw out an example. I don't know if it's public knowledge yet, but that's okay by me. Fleet Services has found 30 vehicles that get started less than 10 times a year. Why are we replacing them? We're not going to do that. I don't have the savings for that in my mind right this minute, but that's the kind of thing we're going to continue to pursue. So.
We have questions stacking up here, and let's also remember we have collective bargaining that influences a number of these situations. Director Vu is next.
When I went through the forecasting team, one of the things that we did account for revenue was potential increase of revenue with fire taking on EMS services and also urban renewal dollars that those coming online that weren't accounted for in the future forecast, and then a couple other efficiencies. What happens if all those go through, positive side, and this levy pushes through? You can draw back the levy. My concern is that all of a sudden, just like we have a house, you will fill the space with it. And concern is that when there's fat in there.
I can.
Okay.
You want?
Sure, I can address some just from my history on the budget committee. If we create the money that would be collected through the emergency response, through that would go into a separate fund. So what we're telling the public is that we create this levy and a separate fund for the library, the parks, and Center 50 Plus. Those services are guaranteed at their level for the next 5 years. The things that you're describing in terms of increasing revenue from emergency transport, that would go into the emergency transport fund. So those two things don't mix for good reason. You don't want to be funding your library out of your emergency services transport fund.
Just to kind of add on to that, sorry. So the immediate gap right now is like to look into this 5-year levy for the community services, like the revenue streams that you're talking about, the payment in lieu of taxes, URA, fire fee, EMS fee. Those are the ones that have to go into, as you can see, even with the levy, there is a red line there, right? So that needs to feed into that and address public safety. So that's kind of the idea here is as new revenues are coming in, when we have this temporary 5-year measure in place, it gives us a plan for the long-term sustainable funding model. And then we need to kind of evaluate that. And that work has to start today or like after the levy situation. So that's kind of the idea. Those are going to go into public safety and also, gives us some time to figure out what this long-term plan is for funding.
We've got a number of additional questions that are going to be asked here. I have a prediction. We are probably going to run a little bit over even just to take on these questions. And I know that can be challenging for people. There needs to be a vote at the conclusion of this. And we are prepared to pass out ballots to do that. But we need to get through Q&A as well. Kurt, you are next up.
So thanks everybody for being here. And I want to make a couple of points. Number one, there's not a single soul in this room that does not. But this is a room full of a lot of business operators, business owners, right? We are in a turbulent financial time. And let's just take the general fund. Your deficit is a percentage of the general fund. By my number, it's 6.8%. But let's say it's 8%. This room is full of a number of people, and there are hundreds of businesses that in the last 24 months have made 8% or larger shifts to right-size their company. Because when you run a company, when you run an organization, you have to run your company based upon the top line income, not the bottom line expense. And so
Just get to your question.
No, and so it's just a point of clarification. I think a lot of folks that are thinking in this room right now, because I know for one, I've cut 12% out of my budget. It's hard, but
the city is required to provide certain services that regardless of cuts, I think the impact of PERS and the collective bargaining is what you're seeing on the compression there. John Miller next.
For the library and Center 50, in a given month, how many unique users of those facilities are there? And what percentage of the population is that?
Scott Archer, the Deputy City Manager. So Scott, do you have those numbers or Josh?
I don't have those stats in front of me, but they're on an annual basis. For example, the library, we have 300,000 unique visitors at the center. On an annual basis, it's something closer to 100,000. So we can kind of do the monthly math, but that's very round numbers.
Okay. An important distinction now is, because I thought they would have to be the answer is how many visits. But my question is how many unique visitors? Because I'm interested to understand what percentage of the population in Salem makes use of those facilities. Program. And I'm interested in the library and the Center 50. Part something's different.
I can give a quick update, thanks, Josh. So our current card holders in the city limits of Salem at the library is about 54,000. We know that for sure. So, but how many of those visit, all the time? So that's one stat I can give you that's first.
Angela Plowhead, please.
So my question was related to the 5-year temporary piece of this, and you sort of answered that in that it's just a bit of a breather to give you more time to develop a long-range plan. What's going into that long-range planning now at this point?
So we are pursuing capital district, just the payment in lieu of taxes. We are looking at the URA. I know the fire chief is here, fire response, and all the other revenue sources that we are going to aggressively kind of going after those revenues.
We just heard that didn't want to fund the general fund with the, like the fire emergency response. So trying to make that.
So that kind of allows us to use that dollar amount towards fire, right? Like, so I don't know, Chief Gurbath, if you want to kind of add to that.
Jameson, can you just grab them and spread out the ballots, please?
Yeah, good morning. I'll be very brief, but when we stand up the ambulance service starting July 1st, we do reimbursements for ambulance transports. That goes in a separate fund. It is an enterprise fund that is exclusively used for emergency medical services. So those reimbursements will be reinvested for buying new ambulances. All of our pay and benefits for those workers actually get paid out of that. I'll tell you right now that the projections are just at the projections. If you look at the City of Salem, 80% of our transports, 80% of our patients are under some sort of federal reimbursement program, whether Medicare or Medicaid. And so right now, I think federal reimbursement programs are something we probably can't count on fully. So we are certainly being good stewards of that process and of the fiscal constraints we have, knowing that there are projections and there may be very significant changes to our reimbursement.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we could remain order here, we have a lot of side conversations going. Please do not fill out your ballot. I have not given you instructions on how to do that yet. There's gonna be some nuance coming up here on that. Part of the challenge of, I will say editorially, is we did the switchover. Our organization brought forward our concerns about the switchover to privatizing ambulance service. And now what has occurred with the new administration is federal reimbursement dollars, which we were counting on to be the bonus of switching over to private, back to public service, is in question. We don't want to be one of those that said, I told you so, but we have brought this concern up and it is facing us now potentially. I hope that is not something that occurs, because that will have another compounding effect, obviously, on our budget here in Salem. President Herron.
This is a question for Chemeketa. First of all, thank you all for being here. Chemeketa, how have you done any polling outside of the city of Salem and the external Marion County? What does it look like and what's the plan sort of address? Because as we all know, right, the last attempt passed in Salem, but it was really outside of Salem.
The data that I shared with you was throughout our entire district, Marion, Polk, Yamhill counties, and Lynn up the canyon. And it was representative of the people who actually voted. And that was what I shared with you earlier in terms of 40% not knowing it was a renewal bond. That was the district as a whole.
Last question, Dick Whitnell.
I just wanted to share with Julie, you brought your little counter. Mine says 2,589. That's when I'll be 90. And it drives crazy me having that. I wanted to talk to where's the leadership on getting things to pass, particularly at Chemeketa. Are you right? Are you the chair on that? Because it takes a heck of a lot of work, and that's what was done in the past. Is when the communities are going to pass the police lobby, when that was through, that's when it went down, and you had a group of people, 10 or 15 people that really worked hard on it. Then who's gonna be the chair over there on Chemeketa? Or who's gonna be your community that's going to go out and lead the lay people? Lay leadership.
Well, we have a group that is the PAC, and we have board members on the group. We have
the chair. Are you running this thing, right? You're gonna sit. You're gonna close. That's
Question is, who is preparing the Chemeketa Bond campaign?
Ultimately, it falls to me. I mean, we rely heavily on our consultant, JL, for operational stuff. But in terms of, at the end, it can't be anybody from the college. A public employee has to be somebody else. So that will fall to me as board chair.
Okay, thank you, President Hector. With that, ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking our panelists?